Hi everybody, and welcome to another Advent encouragement, and today we're on number 12. Hope you're enjoying and being blessed by the readings and the encouragements each day so far. Today we're in Isaiah 41 and also Matthew 11, and there's lots in these. This is just a skim on the surface. These are two very provocative passages, so hopefully you've been blessed and enjoyed them. Isaiah, remember, the first 39 chapters are warnings about judgment. Then the warnings come true and Babylon sort of loots the whole place and takes people off into captivity, and the people of God are exiled. And then we arrive in 40, which is a little bit of comfort and consolation, and 41 continues that theme of comfort in them through these beautiful prophetic pictures of the future where things are different. And Isaiah 41 is totally fascinating. But verse 14 might just grate a little bit with someone out there. It says, "Fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel." Now, we might not like that language that people are being referred to as a worm or worms. But think about it like this. Think about the fact that when God created, he created stuff, then he created life, then he created human life. So creation moves forward, and the pinnacle of that creation is humankind, men and women. God has a very high view of men and women. In fact, it says, doesn't it, in Psalm 18, if you want to go back on the encouragements for the Psalms, it talks about, you've crowned us with splendor. You've made us a little lower than the angels, or a little lower than God. It says that. So God has a high view of humanity. But there are decisions we make and things we do where we turn our backs on the Creator and we embrace a kind of form of decreation. When we see that, don't we, in life, where we see people behaving almost like animals sometimes in things that's possible for human beings to do. Like we do things that are so unhuman, or indeed sometimes we dehumanize other people. It's possible that we can take creation backwards. And so the very choices of the people of God here mean that they're not living out their divine purpose. As Irenaeus said, the glory of God is man fully alive. Well, these people aren't living fully alive. They're in captivity. They're in exile. Their life's so difficult. And he speaks to them. When this encouragement comes, it says, "Fear not, you worm." Okay, now if you're still uncomfortable, go back to verse 8 and see that God does have a high view. "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend." Okay, my friend. God loves us. And he speaks to these people who have embraced, death in a sense. They've turned their back on the source of life and they're being referred to as the worm. Fear not, though. Fear not. You might be living so much less than you were created to live, in exile, having ignored all the warnings, but fear not, you men of Israel. Okay? That's who you are, men of Israel. "I am the one who helps you," says the Lord, declares the Lord. I'm the one who's going to help you. And listen, your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Now remember, Redeemer means somebody who buys somebody else out of slavery. Your Redeemer. So they're in slavery. They have embraced this kind of less than they were meant to be identity, these worms. And he says, "I'm going to help you. I'm your Redeemer. I'm going to help you. I'm going to buy you back. I'm going to do that." And listen to this. I just think this is totally crazy, incredible, but also sort of slightly weird. Remember, they're referred to as worms. Now think about a worm. Okay, a worm would not be the sort of go-to insect or animal if you wanted to burrow through a wall or burrow through a stony mountain or something. But listen, "Behold," remember, speaking of the worm, "behold, I will make of you a threshing sledge, new, sharp, having teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and crush them. You shall make the hills like chaff. You shall winnow them, and the wind shall carry them away. The tempest shall scatter them." In other words, the worm is going to crush the mountain in such a way that it's dust-like enough to be blown away. Totally incredible concept. I absolutely love this from a commentator called Redpath. He says, I don't know of any other than the Creator himself who can take a weak worm and make it sharp with teeth. Only God could do that. Are you getting the picture? The worm becomes so sharp and destructive that it's going to destroy a mountain. And it's not difficult to make the jump, is it, to what Jesus says to some young men he picks up on the sort of shores of Galilee, fishermen and all these different types of characters. Not much to look at, in fairness. And he says to them, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, not that you'll be able to chew up mountains, but you'll be able to move mountains. You'll be able to say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. He takes worms. He takes people now under the captivity of Rome in the first century, and he says to them, you see, you worms, I'm going to give you teeth, and you are going to move mountains. That's what we read in Isaiah, and that's what we read in the ministry of Jesus. That's the promise. And then it goes on to talk about the sort of provision and the sort of water and shelter that will be given to people in the wilderness if they choose to follow this Redeemer. And we see these beautiful pictures, and it says, I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane and the pine together, that they may see and know and may consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. In other words, worms are going to be given teeth. Then they're going to be given rain in the desert. They're going to be given shelter in the wilderness, and everyone's going to know that the Lord's done it. And that it's because the worms let themselves be put into his hands. That's what we see. Incredible picture, isn't it? And so then we move to Matthew 11, where a fella called John the Baptist, who has been proclaiming about the coming of this Redeemer for some time, baptizing people in the wilderness to prepare themselves, saying you need to turn away from the source of death and embrace the source of life, and not be worm-like, but be his. And this guy, he's only human, even though he's, by Jesus' definition, there's no one greater born of a woman than John the Baptist. But he has this moment of doubt, and he thinks, is this really the one? Is this really the Redeemer? He's come to rescue us from exile, to provide for us and protect us. Is this really the one? And Jesus leaves him in no doubt. But then Jesus talks to a crowd, and he says, truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. In other words, the worm, like the most lowly worm of us in the kingdom, can be greater than John the Baptist. Mountain moving people, worms with teeth, we can be that. But from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. Now, I just want you to look at that verse 12. Even if you have to pause this video, look at that verse 12. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. This is such a controversial verse in the Bible, and lots of people disagree on it. There's some people who say that this is speaking about persecution and martyrdom, okay? From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, okay? Now, we know that John the Baptist suffered persecution and in the end was beheaded by the authorities, suffered violence. And it goes on to say, and the violent take it by force, or violent men take it by force. In other words, the kingdom of heaven is always going to be struggling against those trying to destroy it. That's one view of this verse 12. The second view is that it speaks of advance. It speaks of a kind of determined advance needed. If we want to see the kingdom come, that we need to be the men and women who take it by force. We need to be those people. And I don't know which way you would fall down on that, but what I want to offer to you humbly is what I think might be the right answer, but you can disagree. And it comes from an incredible thinker called Don Carson. And this is what he says, the kingdom has come with power, raw power and magnificent energy that has been pushing back the frontiers of darkness. This is especially manifest in Jesus' miracles and ties in with Jesus' response to the Baptist. The kingdom is making great strides. Now is the time for courageous souls, forceful people to take hold of it. You see, the idea is that it's more about taking it by force than by violence. Of course, Jesus would never want us to be violent, but he does want us to be forceful in our desire to see his kingdom come, to be determined and passionate to see his kingdom come. The kingdom won't be received passively. It's founded on God's work on our behalf, but it's also extended by our passion and purpose in wanting to see God's kingdom come. I love what a commentator called Poole says. He says, they are not lazy wishes or cold endeavors that will bring men to heaven. Folks, here's my conviction and my encouragement for you today. That, if we want to be more than just worms, we've got to put ourselves in the hands of the Redeemer. And the Redeemer can take us, he can give us teeth, and he can lead us into a new authority where we can tell mountains to be moved. That's what he's calling us into. And John the Baptist was such a man, and Jesus knew that as we try and see the kingdom move forward, we will meet violence. But we've got to be people of force. We've got to be people of force. I love, there's a book by John Piper called Don't Waste Your Life. And I don't want to waste my life. I want to see the kingdom come. And I remember in my earliest days of being a Christian, I became a Christian through a gospel hall, through a postal Bible school camp in Wicklow. And I remember it was said many times at that camp, but it was said many, many, many times in that gospel hall as I was discipled by some brilliant, beautiful people. They used to use this little poem: we've only one life, it'll soon be past, and it's only what's done for Jesus will last. We've only one life, it'll soon be past, it's only what's done for Jesus will last. May you be a worm that is reinvented as a friend of God, who's given teeth to call mountains to be moved into the sea. And may you be forceful enough to see the kingdom come. May you not be passive in your desire to see people won for the kingdom and victories won for Christ. It's only one life. It will soon be past. And it's only what's done for Jesus will last. I hope that's of a blessing to you. Speak to you soon.